Okay, thank you very much, Joao. So in my part, I will explain you what is the different discovery models that are promoted by eDelivery. First of all, what we call a delivery model is actually the way that the participants in a network technically discover each other. And in eDelivery, we distinguish two different discovery models. The first one is static, and the second one is dynamic. So typically, the static model is when each participant knows each other and typically trust each other. Usually, this is done by the exchange of mutual exchange of certificates. And it applies well when you have a limited number of participants and when the list of participants is pretty stable. It requires a manual configuration whenever you add a new participant in a network. On the other hand, we have what we call the dynamic discovery. And this dynamic discovery is designed for networks where you have a lot of participants, and it can be thousands of participants, and you don't want to add every time you have a new participant, you don't want to manually add this participant. So it applies well when you have a large network, but on the other hand, it requires the setup of additional components, like and in eDelivery, the components that were chosen are the SMP and SML. So SMP stands for Service Metadata Publisher, and SML for Service Metadata Locator. Originally, these specifications were created in the PayPal project, and then they were standardized by Oasis. So in this presentation, I will mainly focus on the dynamic discovery. So to explain the dynamic discovery, we have basically two phases. In this slide, I will present you with what we call the registration. So first of all, a small description of what the SML is. So the SML is the centralized component that you can see in the middle of the picture, and it is typically called to register the SMPs and the participants into the DNS. So in order to make the operations not depending on a single point of failure, SML returns everything into the DNS, which makes it is very resilient. So in case that the cell is not available, it will be still possible for the participants to exchange. The SMP is a place where you publish your metadata on the participants. So in one SMP, so this is typically a distributed component, and in one SMP you can hold data, publish data for multiple participants. It's not necessarily one access point, one participant, and one SMP. For example, just to give you an idea of the figures, in Nepal you have something like 40 or 50 SMPs holding metadata for 60,000 participants. So let's focus now on the registration process. So typically, the target of this process is to make sure that all data are available. So typically, you would have one administrator, but this is not mandatory. It could be directly an access point calling the SMP. So the administrator submitting some metadata into the SMP, and then the SMP will automatically call the SML, which will, as a result, register the participant into the DNS. The communication between the SMP and SML relies on certificates, and is so typically this is two-way SSL. So once the data published into the SMP, so typically in the SMP you will have the metadata participant containing the information, the type of documents and services that are available and can be handled by the participant, and also the the URL, the endpoint address of the access point that can be used to reach the participant. So now we can go to the phase. So this is a step where all the data are already into the DNS or into the SMPs. So let's take the example of the sending of a message. So Joao explained the four-corner model. So you have first the original sender, which through his backend submits a message to the access point, and he can use a connector or not, depending on his requirements. And then the access point will hash so we'll first extract the participant identifier from the message. We'll hash it. This is to canonize a string, and then in the access point, it will look up into the DNS with this canonized string, and as a result, it will obtain the domain name of the SMP. It won't directly the URL or the endpoint, the access point, just get the location where the metadata of the mail file is located and in the SMP. When looking for the party B metadata, it will get the address where the SMP, the address of the SMP holding the metadata of this participant. And then the access point will construct a URL based on this domain name, and will be able, that's the step number 3, to retrieve the metadata from the SMP. It will then analyze the metadata and will discover which transport protocol is supported, if the message can indeed be received and processed by the final recipient, meaning does it have the capability to process the message. And finally, we'll send, so that's the step 4, we'll send the message to the receiving access point, because that the endpoint is located, is inside the metadata that was retrieved. And once the access point receives the message, it will just then deliver it to the backend. So this is it for the presentation of the operation phase. This is very high level. I'm not entering too much into the details, but just to mention that we have actually two types of records that are registered into the DNS. First type of records is the CNAME records. The second type comes with the Oasis BDXL specifications. It's pretty new, and it is NAPTR records. So CEF eDelivery hosts provides SML as a managed service. So we provide the SML as a service, and it can be used in multiple domains. For the moment, it is already used in the Open PayPal network and will soon be used in the eHealth domain. We can go now to, yes, the interactive quiz. So we have two questions that we'd like you to answer. If the SML is unavailable, can the access point still exchange messages? Second question is, if you have a limited and stable number of participants, do you think that you need dynamic discovery? Okay, so the responses are pretty good. Just to make it clear for the first question, if the SML is unavailable, the access points can still exchange messages, because in the operation phase, the SML is never called. Only lookups in the DNS are performed, meaning that if it removes actually the SML from being a single point of failure, and as the DNS is highly replicated in the internet, the data will always be available. So thank you very much. I will now pass the mic to Martin to discuss, that will present you with the security models.